Hello and welcome to Soul Talk with Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel. Rabbi Aaron, I was having a debate inside myself recently on the topic of how much do our intentions matter? And I thought this would be a great question to ask you. And I can see both sides. On the one hand, how often am I almost comforted by thinking that my intentions matter because I meant well, and even if things didn't work out well, or maybe someone was hurt, but if I know I meant well, that gives me some comfort. And I think intentions are significant. On the other hand, I also recognize that how many people mean well and still can do something that's a problem, that's not okay. Someone gets hurt, something happens, and as much as someone might have meant well, there's this saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think there could be some truth to that too. So from a Torah perspective, do our intentions matter? How much do they matter? Is there some sort of objective right and wrong separate from intentions? And how do right intentions, even if there's a right and wrong, come into play with determining if what I did, said, acted, etc., was okay or not okay?
Great, important question. Our sages tell us that God connects good intentions to action. In other words, if a person had good intentions and they put in an honest effort, but things didn't work out, God considers that as if you actually actualized that intention. There's a cute little story about a great Hasidic master, Rav Zusha. And Rav Zusha used to always go to the mikveh, that ritual bath, every morning. And one day he comes out of the mikveh building and he's ecstatic. And his brother meets him and said, "Why are you so happy?" He said, "Well, I jumped into the mikveh and there was no water." And so his brother says, "And that makes you happy?" He says, "Yes, because it's a known thing that God considers good intentions as if they have been acted upon. And I had good intentions, and clearly God did the mikveh for me this day. So this is the best mikveh I've done because it's not that I only had the intention and the action, but I had the intention and God considered that He did the action for me." So intention is very powerful and very significant when a person honestly wants to do it, intends to do it, puts in the effort to do it, but for whatever reason, there was no outcome. Now, that's for good intentions. Bad intentions, our sages tell us, God does not consider to be identified with action if the action doesn't happen. So let's say a person had bad intentions, does everything they can to bring those intentions into action and put them into action, but somehow things didn't come into actions. Well, God will not count against you those bad intentions as if it was an action. So it's win-win. Win-win is good intentions, even if the outcome does not play out and happen, God considers as if there was an outcome. And bad intentions, if the outcome does not happen, God will not hold those bad intentions against you as if it happened, but still, it's not good that you're having bad intentions. And so that's an important idea about intentions. On the other hand, Judaism values very much action. And sometimes people say, well, if I don't have the right intentions, I'm not going to do it. Because I only want to do it if I really, really had the right intention to do it. And that is not, in Judaism, we're practical, go do it. I probably shared this story in our conversation many years ago when I was a young rabbi running around at a conference teaching class here and there and here and there. And I met an older rabbi and I wanted his counsel. And I said to him, I'm really wondering whether, I say I really want to do good and I teach because I want to help people have better lives. But how do I know my intentions are pure? And how do I know that really this is a cover up for my real intentions, which is just my big stupid ego? And he said to me, well, that is a foolish question. And I said, thank you. And I said, why? He says, because that's the way your evil inclination sabotages you from doing good. Like if you're doing good, don't second guess what were your intentions. You're doing good. And let's say your intentions were about your ego. Well, you know what? If ego is making you do good things, that's a good thing. We'll get the intentions to catch up to the actions. And he said to me, listen, you're going around teaching, you try to rip anybody off? I said, no. I try to manipulate anybody? I said, no. He says, so why are you asking these questions whether your intentions are good, your actions are good, and just keep doing good actions? So we have to be very careful that, of course, intentions has a tremendous impact, so much so that if a person honestly has a good intention, but the action didn't come out to fruition, God will count the intention as if it was acted upon and fulfilled. But on the other hand, a person shouldn't use the idea of the importance of intentions to undermine good deeds that they're doing.
So far, what you're sharing actually gives me comfort because knowing that meaning well is significant and having good intentions. And there is also, we've had discussions that results aren't always in our hands. So there's a significance to making an effort or having a thought that I'm glad and comforted, I'd say, to know that that matters. But we've talked about cases where I intend well and something doesn't happen at all, like the Rav Zusha story, or I maybe even had negative intentions, but in the end, nothing happened. So that's not going to be counted against me. There's actually comfort in that. Or I didn't have the best intentions, but I did something good, which I will also have to say that's so significant because I think many of us will think I'm just not there yet, or I didn't, it was a good act, but I wasn't really purely motivated, or I like the question of how purely motivated. But what about a case where I intend well and there's a negative result, meaning maybe I said something having good intentions that I thought this was an important thing to share, but I ruined a relationship. I mean, there's times where I really was well meaning, but someone else could say the share information intending to ruin the relationship. So if the result isn't positive, what happens with that good intention?
It still counts as a good intention because you had every intention to do good, and it didn't work out. You misunderstood or you miscalculated how they would take that. Of course, you should apologize, but as we've talked about in previous conversations, your ultimate power in life is your intentions and your choices. Whether your intentions and your choices are reach fruition, that's all in God's hands. There's it's like business. There's my business, your business, and God's business. My business is the choice business. God's business is the results. I don't have control over results. Now, no, most people don't experience that. Like I don't experience that. Like if I choose to move my fingers, then I have every expectation that for sure I am the master of the results that my fingers are moving. But according to our sages, no, you have the choice. God has the keys to the action. And therefore, so if the action didn't turn out the way you wanted it, but you genuinely had good intentions and you really wanted to do good, but somehow things went sour, of course, you should still apologize, but you did what you can do, and the rest is in God's hands.
That takes a lot of guilt off of, I'm sure, many people's shoulders hearing that and understanding that. Especially, I think everyone's experience is having good intentions and then results aren't what we anticipated. And some of it, I'll often say, I don't have that crystal ball to see how this is all going to play out. But I want to ask
again, even though we've minimized the guilt, I still think a person should reach out and apologize because in the eyes of the person who is feeling bad, they probably don't have this attitude, well, if this is the way it happened, it was God's will, even though you had good intentions. That would be great if they had that attitude, but most people probably don't have that understanding. And therefore, one should apologize and do the best they can to better their relationships.
So I want to ask you, and I'm thinking as we're talking about this, about another aspect of this, because there's definitely people I know, I'm sure you've come across people like this too, that aren't following any religious moral code, but they would describe themselves as a good person, and I try to make good decisions and have good intentions. But their good intentions are all driven by their own personal sense of what's right and wrong, okay, not okay. And as I'm thinking about what we're talking about, and there's a certain aspect, again, that to me really is helpful to know intentions are taken into account. But I also see how without knowing, let's say, what God wants, what God sees as good, if we're only going to be doing this based on, well, I know I had good intentions, so therefore it must be okay what I did, we could get into trouble because I'll take an extreme example. Sometimes it's counterintuitive what God wants and what we want. I might think that I'm being kind to someone by putting them out of their misery by ending their life, but God would see that as murder. So the intentions, I say I'm a good person, but it's making me realize the importance still of a moral code, or even with good intentions, we could actually be doing very wrong things.
Right. I remember I was in Toronto and I came upon a channel which was a show of a debate on abortion. And one was presenting the moral case for abortion. It's the woman's body, it's up to her. Another one was presenting the case that no, it's not moral. But it's interesting that this was just each one's opinions, and neither one, presenting what they consider to be logical, while neither one saying, but is there not some record of a higher source a greater authority who tells us what's right. Like for instance, one could make an argument that if a child is born and they're severely brain damaged, then we would be doing them a favor and their parents a favor by killing that child. But according to Judaism, you can't do that. And logically, a person would say, well, but they're not functional and they're only going to be a weight. So wouldn't we be doing everybody, even that person themselves, a favor? And that's the danger zone, how such serious questions are being determined by what I think and what I think could change very, very significantly within a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year. And what seemed once upon a time moral, today would be considered immoral. What was once upon a time considered immoral, today's taste could be moral. Unless I have a code that I have good reasons to believe is sourced in the divine who created the world. Because, how do I know what I'm doing is good if I don't know the entire story? Like a person, it's like a person who's once upon a time we didn't have ways, we had helicopters and they were up there in the sky and they were giving us traffic reports and they were telling people which highway not to take because it's all blocked up. And imagine I'm driving to work and I'm in a hurry. And the helicopter guy says, don't take Highway 1. But as far as I can see, Highway 1 is clear. And I start to wonder whether this guy is not protecting his friend and wanting him to get to work and is trying to clear the highway for his friend. Because with my eyes, I can see the Highway 1 is okay. And I'm not going to trust this guy, in his helicopter. And so I'm zooming along Highway 1, feeling really good about myself. And then suddenly, 10 minutes later, I find traffic piling up, and I'm late for my meeting because I'm stuck in traffic for 2 hours. Is there a source that's seeing the whole picture from above? Because for us to determine what we think is good, we might be able to figure out 1 step, 2 steps, but can we figure out where this is all going to land in the next couple of decades, or centuries? Judaism is claiming that we're getting guidance from the higher perspective, just like that guy on the highway is getting perspective and guidance from the guy in the helicopter that sees it all from above. The question is, do we have access to a guiding force that sees all of history from the beginning to the end and can give us guidance based on that, that data? That's the clay of the Torah.
That's such a powerful analogy you gave because I'm thinking about it. I once heard, which is it's really true, that oftentimes we equate what feels good for what is good. And if something's uncomfortable, we think it's not okay, but that's actually not true. So when God sends us situations that are maybe uncomfortable, we think, oh, this is bad. But no, it actually might be one of the best things for you because that's where some of the growth happens. And what you're sharing here about that full perspective is I'm only in the moment with my limited vision, what I can see, and very much making decisions based on what feels good right now. And I think this is such an important addition to this conversation about intentions because as we're developing it and I'm thinking about it is I so appreciate the first part that yes, intentions matter. On the other hand, this is a very important element of recognizing sometimes my intentions are based on my limited view of what I see now and not this bigger picture of what's actually in my and the world's and the other person's ultimate good. And then we really need divine guidance.
Right. In our prayer called Hallel, we say, Hodu Lashem ki tov ki leolam chazdo. Be grateful to God, Hodu Lashem ki tov, that He is good, ki leolam chazdo, because His kindness is forever. And that last word is really important. His kindness is forever. So what might be happening right now in your life might not feel like it's God's kindness. But God's kindness isn't just simply interested in getting you through the next week or the next year, but yet getting you to eternity. And therefore, what might not feel so good right now actually might be the best thing for you in the long term.
So you're giving actually a very, very important roadmap and as far as our conversation of intentions, is that one of the things I do have to keep in mind is, of course, a good place to start is having good intentions, but making sure my intentions, my good intentions are actually in alignment with what God sees as good intentions and outcomes is really an important next step to take. So again, I appreciate that our intentions matter even if we take a misstep, whether we had a good intention and took that misstep versus we were actually trying to manipulate someone and took a misstep. That gives me personal comfort. And yet we still have to make sure that our good intentions are in alignment with what God sees as ultimate good, not just my personal feelings.
Absolutely. We can gather data. What would be the best way of life for us but how much data do we have? If it's possible to get a guiding book or guidelines from a source that sees everything from the beginning and to the end of time, that would be the most reliable guide to living the best life. But we can maybe gather, how much. There was a research done by Harvard. I think it was over 75 years. They kind of studied the lives of people for 75 years, and they determined what are the guidelines for a happy, healthy, long life. And that's really great, 75 years. But what if there was a research that did research over 200 years? Or research that was based on data of 1,000 years. Judaism is claiming that everything the Torah is guiding us in is based on the data of an omniscient God who knows all the details from the beginning of time to the end of time. Now, I'm not saying I can't prove that's true. We can have a conversation, the evidence that would indicate that that's very likely to be true. But what I'm suggesting is that if there is possibly such a guide, shouldn't we, consider that and explore it? Because why are we just kind of winging it? And a lot of us people are winging it and hoping to learn from their own mistakes or maybe from the mistakes of some people that are close to them. When maybe there's a better way based on a higher perspective. And that's what the claim of Judaism is.
What you're saying is so significant because I'm thinking for myself. I have one life to live. I'd like to give it my best shot of being a good life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life where good comes out of the choices that I make. Not only from that I think I made good choices, but that it actually has a real effect. And it's a very important point to recognize is that if I'm going to try to figure this out myself, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. Why waste the time? Why not go to the ultimate source who, again, I keep thinking back to that helicopter, the omniscient, the vision of, supersedes time and space to get direction about what really is a good direction to take. Then I can work on, okay, because as I'm thinking about it too, as much as I started out with the question of do my intentions matter, and it gives me comfort to know that they do, especially when they're good, because that always frustrates me. The idea I tried to do something nice or good and it just didn't work out, but I meant well. At the same time, recognizing I really have to be clear on what does God see as good and then work on trying to purify my intentions within that.
Beautiful.
So I really want to thank you for this clarity because we started out in this place of, again, for me personally, I'd imagine others as well, it gave comfort to understand that, yes, our intentions do matter. But it really then took another direction of realizing I really also have to clarify what absolute morals and values are and examine my good intentions with not just that it makes me feel good, but that it's right in an objective stance, which comes from God. So there's both comfort, but also I see work to do to make sure that I'm 100% in alignment in all of us. So I really want to thank you, Rabbi Aaron, for this tremendous insight.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for joining us. Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.
Shalom, shalom.